Hello guys, this is your friend. And we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto returns stronger than Jiraiya Chunin exams part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Naruto didn't have any experiences with Danzo, but Jiraiya had warned him when he was telling him about the dark side of Konoha. The Sannin hadn't been wrong to warn him of the War Hawk. Sai had been brought into Team 7 in order to spy on him, and now that the teen has done so and brought some valuable information, the man was trying to make him his weapon. It was ridiculous. He had much to achieve in this world to be turned into a mere weapon of Danzo. The man was up to no good and Naruto wasn't going to allow himself to be used like that. He had his dreams and this man would not stand in the way, no matter what. Naruto, if you're not going to kill him, we need to get out of here. I'm getting a bad vibe about this. He could never mistake the Sharingan's intent to cast genjutsu on him. He had been in the same situation not once but twice and he would not be manipulated by those cursed eyes the third time. He was even willing to pump chakra worth 6 taels for Naruto's usage just for him to wreck Danzo. He would not forgive those cursed eyes, or as Madara put it simply, blessed eyes. If Naruto was controlled, he would also fall in the same shoes. This time around, he was going to avoid it because this time around, he could do something about it. I'm getting that feeling as well. Naruto responded calmly. He had trained hard enough to sense malicious feeling. Besides, some battles were not determined by firepower alone, but some surprises could tip the scales. Naruto may perhaps have the most explosive firepower than anyone in the Hidden Leaf because of his hosting of the Kyuubi, but that didn't make him the most powerful shinobi. He was miles off from being the most powerful and even those not Jinchurikis could still make fun of him in battle. Experience counted. He didn't have much of it but he would still have to do more hazardous training to obtain a level of power that would it practical for him to step into the shadows. Naruto turned his focus on the old man. Who could have thought that you had the Sharingan? In any case, I don't know much but I will not become your weapon. He held out his right hand, summoning a long silver sword. The blonde blurred out of sight within a blink of an eye. His movements had been both shocking and fast because they hadn't expected him to be able to move with Sai's seal activated and the speed hadn't been anything they were expecting. Naruto appeared in front of Danzo, his sword speeding through the air, heading straight towards the Sharingan the man had exposed. The War Hawk's expression did not change, but he was sweating in the inside because that wasn't something that he could dodge if he allowed it to hit him. No, it wasn't that he would have allowed it, there was just nothing he could do. The movement had just been ridiculously fast that even though he still had the Sharingan to predict movements, he couldn't move his body. At least he believed that his precious agents would come to his rescue. They would use their bodies to protect him. He was their master and the one with the plans after all. Because of this belief, Danzo didn't waver, not even for a second, even though he was sweating. A Nei agent flashed between Naruto and Danzo, his back facing the blonde. Naruto's sword was headed straight towards the back of his head. Within a second, the sword cut through his head as if it was piercing cutting through flesh. The sword cut in the blink of any eye and a second later, the top half of the man's head rolled over to the side. Naruto didn't look too much into the blood that followed shortly. He wanted to move towards Danzo but halted for a moment as he sensed the other agents making moves towards him. Within a second, the agents that were around Danzo had surrounded the blonde. This wasn't that tricky because of his sage mode. He could trample upon a couple of Nei agents without any troubles. His halting was simply because he had no desire to bring about a slaughter at this moment. There was no need to rehearse the bloody scenes he was going to leave on his trail once he decides to leave the village. He needed time to settle things and not rush into things. Why not go through it? You're still not familiar with the smell of blood, and this will be good to test your resolve. The Hidden Leaf's reaction to a massacre would certainly be interesting. Naruto ignored the Kyuubi and brought his sword from the sides. He didn't look at the blood dripping, but it wasn't because he didn't care, just that he didn't want to look. It was surprising that none of these people seemed to care about the loss of their comrade. Was this how things went normally? A person just died and no one had reacted to it. By their looks, they didn't seem to care. The old rule that the mission comes first before saving comrades. His sentimental sensei had moved him away from such a thought, even though following the rules of shinobi was important. It had taught him a lot, but he was going to abandon those comrades. It would be no different than what he was doing. How are you able to move? Danzo asked calmly. His dead agent didn't bother him, he was just another weapon that had served its purpose. He was alive because of the tool, it should have died with a smile knowing that it had done something good in its life. Because I'm not using my chakra or the Kyuubi's chakra. Who told you that such a worthless piece of seal could hold me back? Naruto asked. You seem to be under the impression that I did not sense your intent long ago. Sai should have told you in his report that I am able to sense the emotions, but I guess you have not been told. Don't you think that if I sensed your intent I wouldn't do anything to protect myself? Sai frowned in the inside because he knew that the blonde was stating a fact. An important fact that he didn't disclose to Danzo. He should have known better when the blonde didn't do anything when he attacked. They were attacking now, so naturally, he would fight back. Danzo narrowed his eyes, but the blonde still didn't frighten him. Without the use of the Kyuubi's chakra, there was no way that he could escape this situation. He was confident of this. Still, the main idea wasn't to win a fight here. There was something much more sinister. You don't seem to be in a position to do anything. Danzo stated calmly. That is what you think, Naruto said. The moment he said those words, two clones, in sage mode, crash landed on the sides. It was a crash land because when they slammed into the ground, and it was shattered with a small amount of debris flying around their feet as they straightened up. A second lapse of concentration from one of the agents when one of the clones made a movement towards Danzo, Naruto twisted around in a flash. His speed enhanced by senjutsu was truly frightening, but still not the yellow flash. Even so, he could not be compared to normal means of speed in this mode. As he twisted, Naruto lifted his sword, weaving it through the air horizontally. The sword traveled in blinding speed that didn't even slow down when it cut through the neck of the Nei in its path. The man didn't even notice anything before his head started falling down the ground. Naruto jumped away from the Nei, still holding his sword firmly. It was already 2 down, but was he going to have a go at this? This man wanted something from him and he was hiding something sinister behind those bandages. It was something, wasn't it? He had just returned and already another human was planning to do something to him. The desire was certainly not to kill him but something else. Was it manipulation? It could be, especially with such a man standing before him. Kurama had said something interesting about the hidden leaf's reaction if he ended up killing everyone here. Perhaps Tsunade would back him, but he did not know much about how the others thought of him. But if it was the Danzo squad, they would certainly fight for him to face some sort of punishment. Well, Tsunade would have the final say in everything. Whilst the blonde was still lost in his thoughts, the Foundation Anbu surrounded him once more once his clones dispersed, having served their purpose of distraction. Naruto cleared his thoughts and turned his attention on his surroundings. People who did not have good intentions towards him surrounded him. The motive may not be to kill him, but it was certainly not going to be good for him, and it didn't mean they would not break a couple of his bones if he resisted the charge. It was already 2 down and he had taken them down so easily. Of course, there was still a fight he had to fight. This was just the beginning. Although he had already taken 2 down, the others didn't appear to be unnerved by this. Their body language spelled indifference. Naruto put away his blade and faced one of the agents but spoke to Danzo. What are you really after, Danzo? You say weapon, but there seems to be another hidden agenda. The blonde asked in a calm tone, barely audible. There was no anger in his tone, just curiosity. I heard you tried to turn me into a weapon when I was still younger, but I don't think I have ever done anything. Then again, I did nothing to the hidden leaf to warrant their hatred towards me. A sad story that was, but it was all in the past. He could not forget it, but it was something that he could not go about thinking too deeply about. Fishing for information, Danzo said with narrowed eyes. Are you giving up the fight? Naruto shook his head twice, a somewhat sad and bitter mask slipped into his face as he did so. The blonde closed his eyes for a moment before holding out both his hands. When his eyes opened, they were sharp and appeared to have a raging storm behind them. His enemies sensed chakra and moved quickly. 2 jumped away along with Danzo and 2 more cut the distance between them and him. It was just a single step that took them on his left and right sides. Their swords cutting through the air in blinding speed, aimed at both his shoulders. Naruto could see the attacks coming from a distance. He enjoyed the benefits of senjutsu in such situations because his senses were truly heightened. Perhaps this was what one could call the ultimate fighting mode. Yes, this mode could cause much destruction on the landscape, especially when used by someone with an obsession for destruction. Before the swords could cut him, Naruto's hands moved quickly, each heading towards the incoming strikes. He did something that surprised the emotionless robots. He caught both swords. There was not even a drip of blood from the palm of his hands. He followed this by snapping the swords, forcing the Nei Anbu to jump away to regroup. Naruto blurred away towards his right. Before the Anbu could even land on the ground, Naruto was already upon him. The blonde drove his right punch towards the man's head. The Anbu folded both his hands just above his head in an effort to block the punch. Even though he had been taught pain, he could not help but to bite his teeth when Naruto's punch crashed into his defense. If anything, it felt as if a hammer had slammed onto him. The punch carried a brutal force that propelled his body backwards uncontrollably and he ended up slamming into a tree's trunk with his back. Another Nei operative flashed behind Naruto. He had a right foot swinging dangerously towards the back of the blonde's head. Naruto saw it coming and ducked under, dropping down the ground on his knees before facing up. Kaden. Great Fireball no Jutsu. The blonde released intense flames from his mouth. The flames were supplemented by the power of the Kyuubi to make them much more powerful than a normal fireball. The jutsu flew towards the Nei, but the man quickly did a replacement jutsu, replacing himself with a log. The flames consumed the log entirely, leaving only ashes. Naruto stood up slowly. He wasn't sensing any attacks coming his way. He turned around to face his enemies. They were all surrounding Danzo. The blonde became curious looking at them. The war hawk had the right side of his face bandaged, hiding the Sharingan. His curiosity grew deeper when the Nei suddenly disappeared without a trace. When he tried following their chakra, he sensed powerful chakra signatures coming this way. He could not tell if it were Tsunade's Anbu or more of Danzo's forces. Either way, he did not have much time to think about it as Danzo suddenly burst toward him. Although he appeared to be a cripple, he moved rather well. Even so, Naruto still caught the man by his throat the moment he reached him. The blonde lifted the man with his hold, making it difficult for him to breathe. Something is very wrong in this picture, Naruto said in a dangerously low tone. Yes, he could not deny that there was an uncomfortable feeling creeping through his spine. Before the man could say anything, more guests arrived at the scene. Uzumaki Naruto, what are you doing? A powerful voice demanded. Naruto dropped Danzo and looked at the trees. Konoha's Anbu. Was this Danzo's angle? There were 2 bodies lying beside him, dead by his hand. Had this man set him up? Even so, Tsunade wouldn't believe this scum over him, would she? No, she would not. Then why go this far? We asked you a question, Uzumaki. Yes, Danzo was a corrupt old geezer, but those were just his thoughts. In the eyes of many, Danzo was a respectable elder of the Hidden Leaf. It would certainly paint a crippling image about him if it was said that he attacked the man. But that couldn't be Danzo's angle, could it? What would he gain by doing something like that? Naruto looked down at Danzo with narrowed eyes instead of answering the question. Was this your plan? Danzo acted as if he didn't hear anything and got up from the ground. My bodyguards are dead, he killed them. I don't know for what reason, but he also wanted to kill me. The war hawk stated with a straight face. He walked over to Naruto before he whispered. Tsunade may back you, but there will always be a doubt regarding your actions the moment it's something that sounds bad. You're the Jinchuriki of the Biju that nearly destroyed the hidden leaf. That shadow will always hover over you. The man said before turning to address the Anbu. Take him away. The Anbu didn't act immediately. The reason was simple: Danzo had no authority to order them around. They followed the orders of their commander and the Hokage. This man was an elder, but he had no authority to order them. If it was Shikaku, it would be a different story. They nevertheless had to take Naruto away. Protocol was protocol. Strictly speaking, they had to give Danzo the benefit of the doubt. Of course, they weren't taking Danzo's word as it was. They were Anbu, they would get to their own conclusions. Protocol, however, required that they take the blonde away. There would not be a need, but since he was treated as a flight risk, he needed to taken away. Uzumaki Naruto, you will come with us. The Anbu said as they walked towards the blonde Jinchuriki. You will have to come with us to the Hokage Tower, Danzo-sama. Danzo was still an elder, so unless the Hokage gave a clear order, they could not do anything to him. Neither Danzo nor Naruto resisted. However, as Naruto was taken to Anbu cells, Danzo was taken to see Tsunade. It took just disappearing from the forest of death to Naruto appearing in front of cell. They didn't waste time in sealing his chakra. Naruto still did not resist when they sealed his chakra with seals designed for a Jinchuriki. He was put in a locked cell before they disappeared away. Naruto looked around the gloomy cell for a moment before shaking his head. He walked over to the wall facing him and settled down in a meditative posture with his face facing the bars ahead. Well, I didn't expect things to end up this way, Kurama said calmly. He wasn't the least concerned that the blonde had his chakra sealed. What surprised him was that from being attacked, they now ended up in a chamber of horrors, for humans at least. Perhaps they wouldn't be in this situation if Naruto had been a little smarter. Nothing would come out of reminding the blonde that except for amusing himself. Jiraiya did warn me against the man. It is unexpected, but I had been warned that he was dangerous. Naruto responded calmly. I guess the ball is in Tsunade's hands now. You think that woman will release you? Naruto nodded. She knows me well enough, and if Jiraiya was true, she wouldn't believe anything Danzo says about me. Do you trust her that much? Naruto nodded. Do not be disappointed when she doesn't. You of all people should know humans could never be trusted. When they start thinking twice, they will stab you in the back. We are even in this situation because of humanity's greed and treachery. That man wants my power. I can tell. I'm not deeply concerned about the treachery, Naruto said with a shrug. What worries me is how is this going to work for him? If he did his research, he should know that Tsunade would back me up at any day, so why do it? Is he planning something else? You'll know soon enough, Kurama said before closing his eyes. Meanwhile, Hokage's office. Tsunade had a murderous glare on her face as she stared at Danzo. The Anbu had told her what they had seen and what the elder had said to them. Naruto hadn't responded to their question, nor had he denied anything when Danzo said he was attacked. The Godime dismissed the Anbu. She really wished that Jiraiya was present in the village, but her former teammate had left, and if she doesn't send him a message, he wasn't likely to come back soon. He needed to be back in the village for Naruto's sake. This was a bad thing for Naruto, especially with his history. She hadn't thought that Danzo would make a move on Naruto in this fashion though. She had hoped that nothing bad would happen, but who was she kidding? Nothing ever went according to plan in this world. Things were always moving in another way, nothing ever going according to plan. At the moment, she just wanted to pummel the man down the ground and perhaps send him over to the other world. He was a relic of the past that shouldn't be living at this time and age. Yet, Tsunade had to hold her rage down before doing something reckless. If she did so, it would only add fuel into the fire, and that would definitely go back to haunt Naruto. Why couldn't you just leave Naruto alone? He just returned and the villagers were not looking at him in the same way as they did before he left. Tsunade was remarkably calm. Why couldn't I leave him alone? What are you talking about, Tsunade? Your Jinchuriki attacked me when I went to greet him. He killed 2 of my men, and had it not been for the Anbu showing up, he would have killed me as well. Tsunade snapped. Her fist slammed onto her desk, nearly shattering it. Her killing intent rose dramatically, yet Danzo remained unnerved. Enough with your nonsense, Danzo. She shouted angrily. Anbu, get me Inoichi. It took about 2 minutes for Inoichi to be brought before the Godime. The Yamanaka didn't get to even say the first words as the Godime went on with the order the moment he appeared. Danzo has accused Naruto of trying to kill him. Take him away and prove what he is saying. Just to make sure that nothing gets out of hand, I want the village secured. Inoichi looked surprised with the command he was being given. To him, it was the same as being given the order to search the minds of his fellow clan hands. I'm fine with it, Danzo said as calmly. The moment the War Hawk said those words, Tsunade's anger disappeared. Had she been stupid and blind, she would not notice that something was very wrong in the picture. The fact that Danzo was willing to allow Inoichi to get into his head was seriously troubling. It spelled danger, and for a moment she thought of allowing the man to walk free, but her curiosity got the best of her. Take him away, Inoichi. I want a response as soon as possible, Tsunade said. Hi, Hokage-sama. Inoichi managed some resolve before accompanying Danzo to the torture and intel division. Once they were gone, Tsunade settled in tense silence, trying to understand the situation. If Danzo was going willingly, there was no option of his routine trying something funny. Even so, this was a serious problem in itself. She really needed Jiraiya in case something bad happens. What if Inoichi finds information that incriminates Naruto? Would she willingly disregard that and execute Danzo instead? In any case, she just needed to ensure that this stayed a secret that would only be known to Anbu. Yes, an S-rank secret that would protect Naruto against anything Danzo might have planned. She could just order Inoichi to seal the report and free both Danzo and Naruto. Later, Anbu cells. Naruto's eyes opened slightly as he sensed a presence before the cell. The infamous Ibiki was standing before his cell. He could remember the man from the chunin exams, but aside from that, the man was known for his torturing skills. Fearsome skills, he could say. Pain wasn't something that Naruto feared. He had experienced enough of it. Bodily harm was nothing, emotional pain was the one had to fear. Even so, Naruto didn't think that things would go that far. If it isn't the gutful brat from the chunin exams, Ibiki said with a smile. You have certainly changed, and I never thought I'd end up seeing someone like you here. Naruto looked at the moment for a moment before responding. This is a place for criminals and the rogue shinobi you catch along the streets of the Leaf trying to poke their noses on things they shouldn't. I've been a better person. So, I can say even I didn't think I'd end up in this place. But you cannot predict anything in this world. Ibiki nodded. He unlocked the cell and commanded the blonde to come out. Then I hope you will be cooperative. I'd hate to take extreme measures against Leaf Shinobi. Naruto eyed the man for a second as they walled through dark passages heading towards an interrogation room. I doubt you'd go that far. Something that was left unsaid made Ibiki curious. Oh, why do you think so? A couple of scenarios. Naruto responded without giving a definite answer. Kurama would definitely not allow something like that to happen. The seals that were suppressing his chakra were likely to be shattered and the Biju would go on a rampage. Perhaps just to force him to move out of the hidden leaf. It wasn't that Naruto hasn't noted that the Biju was being pushy regarding him leaving Konoha in pursuit of dreams. Naruto wasn't in a hurry to leave, he had the time to do what he wanted. He could even still try to enjoy his youth anyway. But that wasn't something he would do. If he tried that, he would end up living just normal and the dream would remain as it is, a dream. That was something else though. For now, there was this situation that he was facing. He had taken much time to think about it and it didn't appear as if things were going to turn out perfectly for him. He hasn't even seen Tsunade before him, the woman has not said anything nor has she bothered appearing before him. Not for a moment did he think she just didn't know. He wasn't that naive. Well, at least he was going to be questioned. Perhaps he would get to find out more about Danzo's angle in all these. The man had said he was going to make him his weapon, but that was something he hadn't been able to fully understand because he could not solve the how in the equation. I hope those aren't the responses you will be giving me, Ibiki said as he opened the door to the interrogation room. Naruto entered quietly and sat himself on a small chair. Ibiki faced him with an expressionless mask on his face and a dose of killing intent for measure. For a moment, Naruto felt amused. Was this supposed to make him fearful of the man? Does something amuse you? Ibiki asked in a hardened tone. He didn't like it when his subjects had that look before him. Then again, they only wore it now, but when things got tough, they would be screaming and pissing on themselves whilst spilling the beans. No offense, but you people were frightening back then, Naruto said with a shake of his head. Your killing intent, it does nothing. The man raised his intent to levels that would have made even a low join uncomfortable, yet Naruto didn't even twitch. Even if you raise it to its limits, it's not going to change anything. You're still just a human. I have been exposed to murderous intents of the Biju I host. Well, I don't need to tell you how frightening it is considering that you were very much active back then. Mentioning the Kyuubi was no means an attempt to make the man uncomfortable. The Biju was likely even to raise suspicions about him and his connection with the Biju. People would certainly become nervous if they knew he spoke to the Biju quite often. Nevertheless, Naruto wasn't going to keep from mentioning the Biju because some people couldn't accept it. Ibiki had his eyes narrowed as he responded. That is a night that not one is fond of. There were many people who died on that day. It was night that changed my fate. Because I was used as a sacrifice to contain the Biju, I became a substitute to the villagers, Naruto said before shaking his head. I'm ready when you are, Ibiki-san, Naruto said with a small smile. Ibiki nodded. They ought to begin with the interrogation. Talking about things that didn't matter in this case would not solve anything. Naruto was brought here for a reason. The Godime Hokage had brought him here to conduct an investigation without knowing much what was happening with Danzo. He wasn't to know anything but just try to find out what happened by speaking with Naruto and draw a conclusion. I'm only going to ask you a couple of questions and I would appreciate it if you tell me the truth. The moment I realize you are lying to me, I will use other methods. Do you understand what I mean by that? Naruto nodded. Torture, he said. Good, Ibiki said with a smile. Now, tell me what happened, start from the beginning. Naruto appeared thoughtful for a moment before responding. I was home before being summoned to the Hokage office. The Godime wanted to ask a couple of personal questions regarding my well-being. We talked and before I left, I told her that I was going to the Forest of Death to release my thoughts. I had informed her that it would be noisy. As I was busy with my training, Danzo appeared with a couple of more shinobi, along with my new teammate, Sai. The teammate attempted to bind me with a seal, but I was using senjutsu, so I broke through those seals. Before that, Danzo stated that he wanted to make me his weapon. I don't know what happened, but I attacked. Killed two with my sword, but then the others disappeared without a trace, leaving me with just Danzo. He charged and I grabbed him by the throat. That was when the Anbu appeared. Did he just leave out the part about Danzo's Sharingan? Naruto was surprised at how he was able to leave that out without blinking an eye. Ibiki took a couple of notes before staring at the blonde deeply. Make you his weapon. What do you think he meant by that? I don't know. I tried asking, but he didn't respond to the question. But considering that he attempted to seal my chakra, I can only guess that it involved trying to brainwash me. Naruto said. He didn't seem to believe the brainwash part, a fact that Ibiki didn't miss. Are you aware that he did try to get you to be trained by him when you were younger so that you could become the perfect weapon for the hidden leaf? Jiraiya did warn me about him, so I wouldn't find it hard to believe. The power of the Kyuubi is something attracting to people who are obsessed with power. They would not waste time doing anything to get their hands on it. Naruto said, a bit indifferently. Ibiki took note of the indifference before asking his next question. Who was the first to attack? From what you said, It doesn't appear as if even though they had attempted to seal your chakra, they attacked first. I surprised them by attacking first when it became obvious to me what they meant no good intentions. Naruto said calmly. At that point, not attacking when the opportunity had presented itself would have been a mistake on my part and I may have regretted it. Ibiki stared. Is there anything you're leaving out? Naruto shook his head. I think that's about it. He said. He knew that they would not try to get into his head. Entering the head of Jinchuriki with the Yamanaka techniques was a dangerous risk. If he was a corpse then, it would be fine, but he was still kicking at the biju within could interfere with the process. I see, the man said before closing his notes. He stood up and told Naruto to do the same. However, he allowed the blonde to walk ahead of him just to avoid any nasty surprises. He was aware that the blonde wasn't restricted in his movements, so taijutsu or using a knife to attack him was very much possible. As they walked within the dark passages, Ibiki asked out of curiosity. From what I know, your relationship with the Godime Hokage is almost like that of family. Why didn't you ask about her, or what she thinks about this? Naruto shrugged. At this stage, it is her duty as the leader of this village that must come first. Personal feelings aside, the blonde said. What? Does she have a message for me? Yes, Ibiki said with a nod. She said you must hold on as she tries to conduct things professionally. Most prisoners are usually bound so that they can't even move, but you have your full mobility. Well, there hasn't been any need since you didn't even fight when the Anbu brought you here. I hope you will continue to behave. Naruto smiled. I have manners, he said. Ibiki returned the smile. Yes, says the brat who used to paint the Hokage monument. He said before locking the blonde once more. Once Ibiki was gone, Naruto settled into a meditative pose once more. You mentioned some things you shouldn't have mentioned. Kurama was quick to say the moment the blonde closed his eyes. I know, but I want to see how Tsunade will respond to it. Ibiki surely took notice of it. At this point, I just want to see how people react to this kind of things. Naruto responded calmly. For now, I will just have to wait and see what will happen. Foundation bases. Danzo could not be more satisfied than he was at his grand scheme. Everything had fell into place so smoothly he almost felt like giving himself a pat on the back for a job well done. Of course, he'd just remained expressionless in the face of a good worked plan bearing him much fruit. Tsunade wasn't much of a problem, at least now when he had all the cards in his hands. Yes, things have never looked so pleasant since the Sandaime Hokage came into power, denying him of his rightful place at the Hokage Tower. That mantle was his and he would not go away from this world without sitting on it. Naruto was the key around this time. The blonde had proved to be powerful, it pleased him massively. He had been a disappointment and a failure for a Jinchuriki before he left the village, but now he was proving his worth. Of course, that made him pleasing to the War Hawk. If he could get his hands on the Jinchuriki and paint him black, things would work out well for him. There would be no one to stand in his way with the power of the most powerful Biju. Tsunade wouldn't do anything, especially with the way he set up things. Any public action against him would result in a massive outrage from the villagers. They loved her, but they also resented the Kyuubi and by extension, Naruto. If his message strikes the hearts in the way he wants it, they would surely not accept it if he gets punished whilst the demon gets away with killing 2 innocent members of his unit. When Sai appeared before him, Danzo gave his instructions. You should stay away from the light, for now at least. Naruto is going to tell them everything and they will believe him without getting into his head. I believe that they would not carelessly enter his head knowing that he is a Jinchuriki. In any case, until things settle down and Naruto joins the dark side of things, you will no longer involve yourself in Team 7, Danzo stated calmly. I do, however, have a mission for you. Sai merely waited patiently. He would move when the man before him commanded. He was but a tool after all. With how things were now, he doubted there was even going to be a Team 7. Sasuke didn't look like he was going to come back, and with things their way they were, Naruto could not live within the light freely. He would have to be somewhere he could not be seen by the villagers, such as in Anbu. I cannot allow Orochimaru to take Sasuke's body. He hasn't been forthcoming about the Uchiha's growth, but I have been hearing some things. You are to go to a location. You will be given to meet with someone from Orochimaru for an exchange of information. Once that is done, send the message back and try to locate Sasuke. Don't go in, locate him, observe and then return. Hi, Danzo-sama. What was left now, was what? Yes, Jiraiya was going to come up with something and no doubt Tsunade wouldn't let this go. She might not do anything now, but she will try to do something. He had to find a way to go around that. But before that, he needed to make sure that the Kyuubi was firmly in his control. Perhaps using Shisui's eyes now was even better. If he had used it back then, there would have been a lot of questions about the change in the blonde's decisions and associations, but with everything around him crumbling, things could work out for him. Thinking of the Sharingan, it was something that the blonde hadn't mentioned it to Ibiki was it. If he had suggested so, Tsunade would have had her Anbu try to remove the bandages on his head. Of course, if things had come to that, they wouldn't have found anything because he had accounted for that in his planning. Well, it didn't matter anyway. This just meant that the Uzumaki wasn't hopelessly foolish. Hokage office. It was already late at night, but Tsunade was still sitting in her office trying to make sense of everything that has happened today. Inoichi had already brought his report and told her of Naruto just attacking Danzo. Of course, the man had other memories sealed. Inoichi probably saw what Danzo wanted him to see. It was disappointing and she could not draw out a conclusion concerning that report. Even Inoichi could not even draw a conclusion because the memories were blurred and try as he may, he couldn't get anywhere. She was forced to let Danzo go. Of course, her opinion was that Danzo had attacked Naruto. Whatever this was, Danzo had planned it all. There was no doubt regarding it. But what was she going to do with the man? She was still undecided on that, but what had made her day stressful was a rumor that started to fly about what had happened with exaggerations. Yes, small corners were saying that Naruto had gone on a rampage and killed an unknown number of Anbu and nearly killed the elderly Danzo before he was apprehended by other Anbu. His absence from the streets, which he had been roaming over the past days because of his jobs, was because he was locked deep in Anbu cells. Tsunade hadn't been thrilled when her Anbu told her of those rumors. Homura hadn't even made things easier by admitting it to be true to other corners, at least the part where Naruto attacked Danzo and killed his guards. The entire village didn't know about it, but by tomorrow night, everyone would be talking about. Of course, she blamed Danzo for this. It was his plan to try to get Naruto mistrusted once more. She couldn't even release him because of it. If the entire village started talking about it, it would become a problem. Naruto wasn't just an average shinobi. He was the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. For years, the villagers had hated him and cursed his existence. There were still some who looked at him with doubt, but some had warmed up to him, especially with his showing at the chunin exams. Even so, this rumor could snap everything back to where it was. Naruto was being controlled by the Kyuubi and was a threat. She certainly hoped that things wouldn't go to that point, but who was she kidding? The thought of the Kyuubi made the villagers of this village turn off their humanity and become intolerable animals she could not stand. Still, Tsunade truly hoped that things didn't revert to back where they were. It would drive Naruto to a corner. They may not do anything to him, but the stares and looks of mistrust, Naruto would only be reliving the days of old. She didn't want that for Naruto. Not when she was leading the village. Could it be that Danzo had planned this? If Naruto was hated and forced to walk in the shadows just so he could escape the villagers, or perhaps he goes to a point where he becomes mentally unstable. If so, it was well played by the War Hawk. He could move in if Naruto allows the hatred to get the better of him. The increasing pressure on him would only make it possible for shouts for Naruto to be controlled and monitored because of the increased risk of his escape from Konoha. The Godime Hokage looked up to the door when she heard a knock. Ibiki walked into the office holding a file marked for the Hokage's eyes only. You took your time, she said bit impatiently. Forgive me Hokage-sama, but I was trying to connect a few dots and study my time with Naruto before writing down the report of my interrogation. Ibiki said before placing the file on Tsunade's desk. The slug princess stared at it for a moment before looking back at Ibiki. She didn't touch the report. Start with the bad news. Tsunade ordered. There isn't much, but he doesn't appear to be fond of the treatment he received from the villagers back then. He briefly touched on it and I could see that it wasn't something that made him happy. I could not detect anger towards the villagers. What stuck out the most was when he spoke about killing the two root Anbu. He didn't blink, but just said I killed the two as if he was talking about the weather. There was nothing in his eyes. From what I know, he isn't experienced in killing people. His lack of emotion to death makes me question his mental status. The good news is that what he told me wasn't lie. From my eyes of experience, I can say without doubt that his story is true, according to him at least. Ibiki said in a calm tone. He was cooperative and showed no signs of aggression. I believe him when he says that Danzo made the first move and said something about making him his weapon. Considering that it wouldn't be the first time he has made those intentions known, I don't find it hard to believe. That was at least some good news from a professional. Perhaps Naruto's testimony would fill in the blanks left out by Danzo. In any case, this was what she had expected. She had known that Naruto wasn't guilty of trying to kill Danzo. Thank you, Ibiki. I will study your report and Inoichi's report before making a decision. I don't have to tell you that the contents of this report are not to be shared with anyone. I understand, Hokage-sama. Ibiki said with a bow. Good. You're excused. Ibiki turned away, but he suddenly stopped and spoke. Hokage-sama, this isn't in the report, but there is something that Naruto left out about Danzo. I can't tell what, but there is something that he did not say. I thought if you spoke to him, perhaps he would tell you. Tsunade nodded and thanked the man once more. The slug princess didn't have the appetite to look into the report at the moment. What he had just said about Naruto, the bad, worried her. How could her Naruto, that naive little boy, kill without even blinking? Ibiki had said so. He hadn't displayed any emotion when he spoke about killing two of Danzo's root Anbu. In any case, there hadn't been any need to kill them, he could have just disabled them. That has always been the case with him, hasn't it? Beat them until they could no longer stand. Perhaps it was time to fully accept what Jiraiya had said. Naruto was no longer the same. She had been struggling to accept what the pervert had said about Naruto not being the same as he was. The issue Ibiki had raised was a little extreme, so much more that she was worried about his mental state. For a Jinchuriki turning into a heartless killing machine, that was not wanted. It would raise fears. He certainly wouldn't become like Gaara, would he? Tsunade shook her head. Naruto wasn't like that. There had to be a reason. She nodded and looked at Ibiki's report. She went through it speedily and was pleased when she finished reading it. There was nothing to worry about. She could consolidate the report into one, but now she had to worry about to handle that snake. Yes, she wasn't above using old information to throw him into a cell. However, knowing that Danzo would not willingly settle down, she had to plot wisely to ensure that his cronies were handled. That would be a long process that would involve dark arts, but she wasn't above taking such measures, especially when it dealt with that deceitful snake. Once Jiraiya was back, she would begin with the plotting. She should have done this long ago. Even her sensei should have done so. Midnight, Anbu cells. You just step away from the village and when you come back, it is already on its feet. What was just wrong with this village and the plotters? Kakashi had been shocked just learning that Naruto was in Anbu cells. He had thought someone was pulling a fast one on him, but it turned out to be true. Even when he was tired from his mission, he could not settle without seeing the blonde. He had asked for permission to be allowed to see the blonde and they'd allowed him. The Jonin stopped by the dark cell and looked towards the son of the Yondaime Hokage. What has this village done? Would his sensei ever rest in peace? This village resented and ignored the presence of his son, the son he wanted to be seen as a hero, and now it had locked him in a dark cell that was preserved for criminals. Naruto wasn't a criminal, sure he has changed, but he didn't deserve to be in this place. Naruto, Kakashi called, just to see if the blonde was asleep or not. He was in that meditative position, but his eyes were closed and he hadn't reacted to his presence. The blonde's eyes slowly opened. They were just crystal blue, staring back at him. The Jonin did his weak eye smile. Yo, he attempted to lighten the mood. It didn't work. Kakashi-sensei, what brings you here in the middle of the night? If I was someone else, I'd think you were here to break me out, Naruto said calmly. Well, that would be something interesting. It would change a whole lot of stories that needed to be written. I just got back, Kakashi said. Are you trying to make a joke regarding that? He asked. Well, Naruto had been mischievous and never wanted to stay still. Perhaps he could think of trying to escape from the cell and go to sleep in his apartment just because he could not sleep peacefully here. He had been that kind of person. But this Naruto knew that there would be consequences if he did such a thing. Who knows? Naruto said. He wasn't surprised to see the Jonin here. The man may have been a crappy sensei who only taught teamwork and tree walking as well as water walking, but he was someone who was human. The Jonin had taught him valuable lessons about life. And he has always looked to be someone filled with regrets, perhaps about his past teammates who were now dead. I thought you'd be sleeping, but I'm happy I'm able to talk to you. Kakashi said. This time his eye smile wasn't weak. I can't sleep at this place. I tried, but it seems impossible. And there had been a visitor not long ago. Naruto said calmly. It had been rather displeasing when one of Danzo's cronies operating in the village's Anbu confronted him. There had been a message for him, and that was that Danzo could get him anywhere and at any time. That wasn't true and didn't frighten him at all. He was here because he had allowed it. If he had refused, there was nothing those Anbu could have done about it. They could have tried to fight him, but if he pulled most of his cards, he could have just left them chasing after his clones. The fact that one of Danzo's people had come here to give a message had shown him that the man was after something. He had thought now that he was placed here, the man would try something. Of course, then, he would have to fight, and that was going to attract attention. He may have been accused to attempting to escape if Danzo played his cards right. It had just been a message, which meant that there was another plot running somewhere else, and that made him a little worried. Let me guess, Danzo's people. Kakashi said. Knowing why Naruto was here, it didn't take a genius to figure that out. What did they want? They are able to reach me anywhere. Naruto said calmly. Kakashi was silent for a couple of moments before speaking once more. How are you holding up though? Considering everything that has happened, this is unfair to you. Especially with Danzo walking around the village without any charge on his head. The Jonin sounded bitter about it. You're not even questioning anything. Naruto said. I worked with him before, I know his tricks and I know you. Kakashi said a bit carelessly on the last part. Naruto nodded. Considering everything, my life hasn't been easy, it has been disappointments after disappointments. Our time with Team 7 was fine though. Now, it was perhaps the happiest time of my life. Sakura, you, and Sasuke. Of course, with the latter, it ended with betrayal and a stab in the chest that would have killed me if I wasn't a Jinchuriki. Well, that wasn't the first time he had tried it anyway. You stopped it last time. When I returned, everything seemed fine, the villagers seemed to have changed slightly, of course there were still some eyes, but for the most part one could walk within the streets and do missions without any burden. Just when you think all is well, boom, Danzo appears and says he wants to turn you into his weapon. Long story short, I end up being here. This is the kind of life that I live, but honestly, Kakashi, I don't know if I'm okay. Right now, I don't want to think too much about my happiness. When I get out of here, I will think about it because then I will know what will await me. It can't get worse than this, right? Kakashi flinched with that last question from Naruto. No one should really say those words because they appeared like a curse. Yes, it was going to get worse than this. Today was nothing, but tomorrow by midday, Naruto would no longer be able to walk in the streets freely. Kakashi had known that it would have to take Naruto about doing something ridiculously pleasing in the eyes of the villagers for them to accept him as just Naruto. There was a big, but, nevertheless. If Naruto happened to do something that was considered evil, all those fears, those thoughts they had about him, would come back in the blink of an eye. The human mind was a treacherous thing. One simple wrong could ruin a lifetime of good. And for Naruto, a single rumor could return to the days of the old. It wasn't going to become simple as there was apparently someone running a campaign against the blonde, at least as far as his former colleagues at Anbu have told him. Even if there were some exaggerations, but if the villagers recall what they used to call him, the loved ones they lost, the image of the Kyuubi destroying this village, those emotions would show themselves once more. Had it been a couple of years ago, he wouldn't have had the guts to say it to Naruto, but there was no other choice here. He hadn't spoken to the Godime and the Anbu said they hadn't told the blonde about it yet. But Kakashi wasn't going to keep Naruto in the dark about something like this, even if it would be painful for him to accept. There is actually something, Kakashi said, his tone a bit hollow. I haven't witnessed it myself, but the Anbu said after conducting some investigations, they found out that there was a rumor with some exaggerations running around the streets. It was a surprise to them, because only a few knew about the incident as Tsunade-sama had declared it an S-rank secret. Not even the clan heads were told about it. But somehow, it was doing rounds in the streets. Kakashi didn't have to spell it out what was being said, Naruto could make heads and tails. Yes, he had killed people, but they were probably looking at it as if it was some sort of taboo because he was a Jinchuriki of the Biju that killed many that fateful night. They were exaggerating, but Konoha's people have always acted in such a manner. Naruto didn't find it surprising really. Did he really expect more from them? Maybe, but this was the reality of things. The fact that they had called him a demon brat when he was just a little boy showed him just how treacherous they could be. Naruto sighed disappointedly. These were the humans he wanted to save from the corrupt world of shinobi. What has the world really offered him? Well, it was because the world was in such a state that he could not live peacefully. Yes, he had to fight this world in order to change it. There have been people who say that the world was wrong simply because they wanted to push their agendas, but in this case, Konoha was well and truly wrong and he wasn't the only one who could attest to that. However, he was the only one who was going to do something about it. The bright color that had been in his eyes dimmed slightly before he responded with just 2 words. I see. I believe that Danzo was after this. If this pushes you into the darkness, it would be much easier for him to get his hands on you. People in pain and starting to doubt life is much easier to corrupt. In Danzo's world, he must think that you will be corruptible. A little push is all that is required. He's probably thinking that he can convince you that you no longer have a life in the light but should operate in the darkness. Kakashi said. He didn't know what was coming over him to say all these. Perhaps it was that he was angered by this scheme from the War Hawk. He is rather good at this kind of tactics, Naruto said. If the rumor expands to the entire village, it is going to take me saving this village from complete destruction for them to see me in good light, the blonde sighed, shaking his head. Thanks for letting me know, Kakashi-sensei. I will think about it more along this sleepless night. Kakashi stared at Naruto for a long minute, trying to figure out what the blonde was thinking, but he could not think of anything. Well, Naruto has always been strong, unlike him. The Jonin shook his head. For a moment, he felt miserable at being unable to do anything. When things had been difficult, Naruto's father had been always with him. A pity, from what he heard, Jiraiya hadn't even told Naruto about his parentage. One of these days, he was going to do it, but he figured it would be something that would only hurt the blonde more. Even so, it was still something that needed to be done. There was so much weight on this, Kakashi just felt like sitting by next to the bars, perhaps even doze off. He didn't even have any other story he could share with the blonde. Did it feel like he was abandoning the blonde by leaving him alone here? Sasuke was already gone. He didn't want to lose Naruto too. There had been blunders he made as the sensei of Team 7, but he was man enough to admit that. Of course, it didn't change anything, but he knew, and admitting it wasn't to make himself feel better. Naruto closed his eyes, seeing that Kakashi was having a debate within his head. I see that you have a lot to think about. You should go somewhere you will be able to think clearly, Kakashi-sensei. I also need to do my thinking. Because if I leave this place tomorrow, a whole new world will be awaiting me. I must be prepared to face that. Kakashi slowly nodded. Another weak-eye smile graced his expression, but he did not move, not until a couple of minutes flew by. Once Kakashi slowly retreated, Naruto opened his eyes. A cursed life, huh? Just a day ago he was agonizing about the fact that he was going to betray his friends, and now he was being taken back to those miserable young days he had experienced in this village. His mind was a lot different now, and it felt as if he could get frustrated. But he knew, if he allowed such an emotion to grab him, he would learn to resent people, like murderously resent them. For the path he was going to take, it would be easy for him to get lost. He could not allow hatred to find a room in his heart. Perhaps he would have some stored away, but he would not allow it to control him. If he allowed such, he would certainly live with the regrets for the rest of his miserable life. It wouldn't be a bad thing if you get lost in that way, Kurama suddenly said. If tomorrow becomes unbearable and the villagers return to their ways, what would be the use of trying to create a better world for these people? No one would blame you if you thought of destruction rather than peace. The Biju said. But I know you're not going to follow that path. Either way, humans are such despicable creatures. The bigger question though is, are they worth saving? I'm also a human, Naruto responded calmly. Perhaps my methods and the way I will take will let me take the mantle of God, but I will only be playing God. Well, not with the current power I have. I'm strong but not almighty powerful to take on an entire village. Of course, your power makes me ridiculously powerful, but I have yet to master the control of it. Before the journey even begins, I must bury myself into deep training. If you knew that, you shouldn't have even returned to this village. If you even leave now like this, no one will blame you. The villagers will be happy you're gone. You'd love to leave the village when there is a chance of freedom, Naruto said calmly. I will decide when to move. For now, I'm interested in understanding how these people think. Why would I want to save people when I do not even understand them? You execute jutsu flawlessly when you know everything about it and are a master of its element. I must know more and understand more before I start acting like a god, well, at least to myself. To this village, just the demon they knew I was. Tsunade stood still in front of the bars, keeping Naruto locked up. There were so many things that the mischievous Naruto could have done whilst he was here. Most would be fueled by stupidity and the thought that he hadn't done anything wrong. It was true that he hasn't done anything wrong, but he was being mature enough to keep calm throughout this issue. Someone would have raised hell about the injustice being done to him. Tsunade thanked Naruto for his handling of the situation. She could have done better to ensure that he doesn't end up locked up in this cell, but she had been worried more about the future implications of any issue being raised by this little hassle from that corrupt old fox. If anything, the Godime wanted to grab him by the throat and snap his neck just for being alive. She would at least give it to Danzo that he hasn't come this far by being stupid. Her sensei could have hanged him long time ago, but he didn't do anything. Tsunade could not understand why he didn't do anything, but she would not make the same mistake. If left alone, Danzo was just going to cause more troubles. Well, for Naruto, things couldn't get any worse than they have. It was still early morning, but she had seen the groups forming with people gossiping. Those were images that sent her gut into overdrive, but there was nothing she could do about it at the moment. She really did hope that no one confronted Naruto with this, but she was going to issue a statement denying the allegations about Naruto. Some sensible people would see the reason and stop hating on Naruto, but that wasn't something that one could bank on. Konoha's villagers have never been rational when it comes to Naruto and the Kyuubi. They were always quick to hate and judge. The slug princess smiled weakly towards Naruto, who stared back at her. Tsunade did not say the first word, but Naruto did. You sure took your time to see me, Tsunade-sama, Naruto said as he stood up. He did so slowly before stretching his muscles. Movement was restricted in this place and that made him a little stiff. But I guess you are here to free me. Tsunade nodded, but she did not move to unlock the cell. You don't look too bad, she said in a weak tone. Naruto tilted his head to the side. The woman appeared to be hiding something, or perhaps is trying to ease into something difficult. If she wasn't here to free him, she was here to deliver bad news to him. That would be unexpected. From his conversation with Kakashi last night, he figured he would be released soon, and if Tsunade was going to come with bad news, that would change things. He had reached his tolerance limit. He wasn't going to stay here any longer, but it would depend on what the Godime Hokage was saying to him. If she was promising him something good, then he could tolerate this a little longer. He also knew that it wasn't safe here, knowing that Danzo could get to him at any moment he chose. I think I have had worse than this, Naruto responded in a measured tone. He did not voice his thoughts to the Godime, he waited on her. Tsunade's mood just seemed to worsen at that. It hasn't been a pleasant life, hasn't it? She asked sadly. From the emotional trauma you faced in the hands of the villagers to this. It is still remarkable that even after everything, you chose to fight to protect this village. If there was someone whose loyalty should never be questioned, it would be you. We are here, you are being accused of trying to kill Danzo. We have cleared you of any wrongdoing, and normally you would be free to do anything you want, but because you're Uzumaki Naruto, there is always something happening. Naruto narrowed his eyes thinly. This was perhaps something that had to do with Danzo's intentions. It wasn't a pleasant thing to swallow. Honestly, he was starting to fear for the worst now, because really, Naruto didn't want anything forced. Any forced movement would alter things in ways that he did not want. Well, nothing really went to script, isn't? You could never plan for life to play it in a certain way. There were always going to be forces greater than you which will push things out of your control. If Danzo planned something sinister, then he could not control that, and it would certainly change things for him. Naruto shook his head. Was he forgetting what Kakashi said to him the previous night? The villagers were acting funny. Naruto did not voice those words, he simply asked the Godime, thinking she had something different to say. What is it? Tsunade noted that Naruto's tone displayed no emotions when he asked. It was almost as if he was daring her to say bad news if she wanted to see his reaction to it. The Godime shook her head. Perhaps she was overthinking things. I won't say anything, but it will be better if you just see it yourself. It won't be something you will like, more like a return to those bitter old days of yours. I am sorry for this. If there was something I could do to have stopped it, I would have. The woman sounded in pain when she said those words. Meet me in my office when you are ready. Tsunade said those words and unlocked the cell. She walked away from the blonde Uzumaki without saying anything further. Naruto stepped out of the cell, but he did not feel free. There was no freedom raining down on him. If anything, the world just seemed get heavier and oxygen a little more expensive that he had to labor for it. He feared the world that he was going to see. Kakashi didn't paint a good picture, and Tsunade has just made it worse. About 10 minutes later. To Kurama, this was both laughable and sad. He had first laughed when he noted what was happening in the streets of the Hidden Leaf. The villagers were doing what they used to do before. Well, it wasn't exactly the same, but there were stares and hushed whisperers as the blonde moved about the streets. It hadn't been funny, but the Biju had burst into laughter before calming down to look at it sadly. He didn't think a couple of nights in Anbu cells would result in the blonde going back to that old life. He was sure that perverted Sannin was going to preach for Naruto to do more good for the villagers, to prove himself to be a good person. He had been trying that, but now he would have to do that all over again. Kurama didn't think so. He would not have the patience to do something like that. Hell, if Naruto freed him now, he would not have a problem in making this village a former hidden village. Yes, There was no Yondaime Hokage this time around, he could wipe out this entire village within a couple of minutes. The perverted Sannin wasn't here to summon those toads to stand in his way. There was no one remotely powerful enough to stand before him. Kurama thought of tempting Naruto. If you're tired of all these, I have no problem in letting loose. The Biju said. I would even be content with staying in here for a little while longer without any thought to escape the seal. The Biju said devilishly. Naruto's form appeared before the Biju. The blonde was wearing an expressionless mask on his face, it was just dead of any emotion. When he spoke, the tone did not betray the expression on his face. What makes you think I would even go that far? Kurama shrugged indifferently before replying. I don't know. What about the anger and hatred I feel from you? What? You have taken enough. Don't you think I can't sense those emotions from you? You do enough to control them, but someone would have snapped already. It nevertheless doesn't change the fact that you have them deep in your heart. Naruto was silent for a couple of moments. I'm not that ignorant that I would fail to notice the emotions that I have. He was very much aware of the negative emotions he had in him. They were buried deep within his heart. He tried to suppress them, but this kind of reality made it very difficult. There was a little voice inside his head telling him to punish this treachery, to do something about this. What had he done to these people to deserve this? Just a little rumor and the fact that he was locked up in Anbu cells and they were ready to revisit their old memories. Had it been someone else, they wouldn't have cared or even react in such a manner. He was different from everyone else. He was the host of the Biju that killed their loved their ones. To some of them he sheltered the Biju and to some he had been the Biju itself, such a sad reality. Now, the Biju must influence his decisions, he must be going insane. What was Danzo trying to achieve from doing all these? Did he want to isolate him so that he could manipulate him a little easier? A foolish move. It had its consequences, but he was simply not going to allow that snake to manipulate him because he was feeling lost. He wasn't that stupid to forget that this was because the man started the fire. If Danzo thought he could manipulate him, then he was as arrogant as Orochimaru thinking he could destroy the hidden leaf. What are you going to do about this? You should know that as things stand, even if you wanted to be in their good graces, you would have to save them from total destruction for them to look at you fondly. Even if such an event were to occur, would you even be motivated to save them after everything? Naruto refused to respond to the question. It was something deep that would get him having thoughts he did not wish to have at this time. He had to face the Godime Hokage. No wonder the woman looked as if she was carrying the entire elemental nations over her shoulders. The situation was bleak and could destroy any hopes a person has. Why are you talking as if there was a plan to stay in this village forever? Naruto asked the Kyuubi. The situation wasn't desirable and he hadn't done anything to make these people hate him, but there had been no intention from his side to kiss their behinds in an attempt to get them to like him. He could discuss ways with Tsunade, but it was all just going to be pointless talk because he had plans to leave this village for something greater. This would just make it easy for him to leave. Of course, this didn't mean that this situation didn't wound him. Kurama's response wasn't immediate, but it did come. With you dwindling around the village, I thought you would be having second thoughts. The moment you were arrested, you could have broken out of the cells and make your escape. With what you're going to do, will attempting to kill Danzo really be the worst thing you would have done? Naruto nearly frowned upon hearing those words. Yes, he was going to do so many things, many unspeakable things. This was just wrong because the villagers hated him for something he hadn't done. It was all just rumor, and the fact that he was walking within the streets should mean that he was cleared of any wrongdoing, but they were still looking at him with suspicious eyes. Perhaps he was being hesitant on doing what he had planned on doing. It wasn't going to be an easy road. I have my reasons, but this isn't something that should really get me down. Naruto said those words with a sigh. He stopped walking for a moment and looked up with his eyes closed. He sucked in the cold air trying to get a feel of the village. He opened cold blue eyes and held out his right hand, looking as if he wanted to catch the sun. One of these days, I will stand in this village wearing mourning clothes, and this village will learn to resent my name more than it has yours." Kurama smiled. "Now there is some resolve in your tone," the nine-tailed Biju said. "It might be because I am a little bitter," Naruto said with a shake of his head. "Wouldn't it be something else if I could raise my hand like this and make clouds? From them, we would decide on whether to cast lightning jutsu or water-based jutsu, perhaps with even a little of wind." Kurama was silent as he thought of an image Naruto had just painted. "You'd have to be a god to do something like that," the Biju said a bit sarcastically. "Holding the title of kami wouldn't be so bad. Only gods can change the landscape and how people behave," Naruto said calmly. "People fear power, and only those with power influence the masses. Even though I will have to force my will on people, I won't mind much because the end game will suit what I desire. With your power, it shouldn't be impossible to achieve, even if it takes 10 years, with an army clones that should be like 100 years of training. With my power, I should be able to source any shortage of chakra," the Biju said. "But you should be able to build up your own chakra stamina. To cast such powerful jutsu you'd need vast amounts of chakra." Naruto continued staring into the sky before responding. "I can imagine. I figure trying to create thunderclouds would mean having to form storm conditions. Just having to create that condition will mean using a lot of chakra," the blonde said calmly before looking at the road ahead of him. How much more chakra did someone like Hashirama have? Kurama was silent for a couple of moments before responding. "I have not met any human who has more chakra than a tailed beast." Naruto was surprised at this. He shook his head. "Well, that is something we will think of doing once we begin the real training." He paused for a moment before speaking once more. "The Godime is waiting for me. What are you going to discuss with her?" Kurama asked. "I don't know," Naruto said. "Tsunade's office. Things may be bad, but at least Naruto had people who cared for him," Kakashi thought as he looked at the gloomy expression on Tsunade's face. There has never been doubt that the Godime Hokage cared for the blonde Uzumaki, but it was nevertheless refreshing to see it on her face at a time like this. Naruto was going to need people close to him to be there for him. He still had his friends, and they were good friends. Still, this was a dramatic turn of events. Danzo was always scheming something, but this time he had gone too far. Then again, where are the limits for the War Hawk? Didn't he commit treason by trying to get him to kill the Sandaime Hokage so that he could finally become Hokage? "Tsunade-sama," Kakashi started in a very calm tone. "I understand that Danzo has rallied the villagers against Naruto, and acting in the open might leave a door open for violence from the civilians. Most shinobi population don't even know the dark things that he is capable of doing, but it won't matter since you are the Godime Hokage. Why are not doing anything against him?" The Jonin understood that being reckless would only cost them dearly. Kakashi didn't think that there's still shinobi who hated Naruto for what happened years ago. They were smart and understood things better, unlike the bitter villagers. Besides that, the shinobi have worked with the blonde Uzumaki, so they knew his personality by now. Tsunade didn't offer an immediate response, but when she did, her tone was low yet it was very firm. "Unlike the Sandaime, I will not leave Danzo to act as he pleases. At this age, there is no need for him to operate, and I will shut him down. Of course, I understand that he will not simply lie down if I choose to force the issue. It will be either fleeing or putting up a fight. I simply cannot allow things to spill in the open for the villagers to see everything. I'm displeased with them, but I cannot allow them to get caught in the crossfire of shinobi matters. Danzo will be dealt with, and we will do it in a way that erases his existence from this village along with the foundation. Personally, I don't want anything to happen to his people. I would rather they fall under my command, but we know that Danzo teaches utmost loyalty to him, so I don't know if they will be able to switch should Danzo be killed." Kakashi was silent for a couple of moments before finally opening his mouth. "You don't want to cause unnecessary bloodshed?" Tsunade nodded. "I can't use the term innocent because I know there are things that they have done that can be considered treason. Sai came in just to spy on Naruto for Danzo. We knew that, but we didn't think that it would lead to such a situation. They are all guilty as their master. Yet, she was not willing to have them all killed along with Danzo in a very SS rank mission. What about Naruto? I know he just got back, but it would be best if he went away while I try to solve this Danzo issue, or he could go away after we have solved things. Tsunade said calmly. This is just a thought. I don't know if Naruto will accept it. We have to do what is best for Naruto, mentally. For now, the village can wait. Naruto's mental state and happiness must come first. This wasn't what they taught at the academy, but it would do in this situation. The village was the one that was wrong in this situation. Naruto could be afforded the chance to put himself first over the village as long as there were no treasonous thoughts, and as the Hokage, she consented to it. She would not care what anyone says or what the clan heads have to say about it. The decision was hers and she would do what she felt was best for everyone. The village calmed down with Naruto present. Amway. She could try to make them see sense and expose Danzo's lies to them. Nodding to herself, Tsunade was going to work on that. She was going to let them know that they should be ashamed of themselves. Naruto was innocent and Danzo was the guilty bastard who had tried to take away Naruto for the Kyuubi's power and resorted to dirty tricks when that failed. If she so wished, she could even tell them that the reason the blonde Uzumaki was chosen to be the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki was because he was Minato's son. They could deny it all they liked, but pictures of a pregnant Kushina along with Minato were there. Even a stupid person would ask what has happened to the child of the Yondaime Hokage if his wife had been pregnant days before the Kyuubi incident. Kakashi did not dispute the thought of Naruto taking some time away from the village. There was not much that the blonde Uzumaki could do to change the situation at the time. Before the Jonin could say something to Tsunade, there was a knock at the door. Tsunade didn't have to say anything for Naruto to open the door. There was a bit of a chill air that swept into the office when the Uzumaki walked in. He didn't say anything though, but just settled on the free chair beside Kakashi. When no one said anything, Naruto spoke. I wasn't expecting to see you, Kakashi-sensei. Naruto said in a very calm tone. When you said things had changed, I thought it wouldn't be as bad as I had feared. Naruto said to Kakashi in a quiet tone. Well, it isn't as bad as it was last time around when walking around the streets was like walking inside a steam hot pot. He didn't have to think on whether he could live with this situation because he wasn't going to live in this village for much longer. He was going to leave at any moment, even tomorrow or the moment he leaves this office. He could disappear from the Hidden Leaf for a couple of years. There was so much training that he had to do and so much more he needed to learn. He didn't need to see his friends. Seeing them look gloomy over his situation would just make him feel miserable about leaving. He knew that they were going to have some second thoughts. They were going to look at this and only say it is because the villagers treated him in this manner that he decided to flee the Hidden Leaf. He could not avoid it though. Ideally, he would have liked to leave on better terms, but this was not what he expected. It wasn't going to change anything nevertheless. Kakashi quietly absorbed Naruto's words before thinking about the younger days of Naruto. The blonde had bravely walked around the Hidden Leaf even though most villagers held contemptuous thoughts about him. He hadn't minded, but just walked with a brave face, a wide grin, and didn't seem to care about anything in the world. But that statement now just revealed that he did care about things. There had been those lonely looks when the blonde was alone. Those questions that the Sandaime faced when he went to visit Naruto in his apartment. There was no doubt though, Naruto had been happy in Team 7. They had been like a family. Kakashi cherished those memories and he was sure his blonde student held those memories more dearly than anyone else. It was perhaps the only part of his life that made him happy. What do you think about it? Kakashi asked, just to see how Naruto would respond. Naruto stared at Tsunade's eyes for a long minute. A sad smile flicked through his expression for a second before being replaced by a neutral look. It's really sad. I've never really given myself the moment to hate because I realized it wouldn't make me happy but much more miserable than I was. It turned out to be the right decision when I enjoyed my time in Team 7. Even at this stage, my thoughts are not mixed, but I cannot say that I hate the villagers for this. Perhaps I'm being cynical, but when it is coming from them, I don't think I should lose my sleep over it. That doesn't mean that I love every moment of this, not at all. I don't even understand why they could go back so quickly. I don't want to understand. My thoughts of Danzo are different altogether. The words were a bit cold, but there didn't appear to be any dark thoughts lingering around the corner when the blonde spoke, not even when he spoke of Danzo. Tsunade was curious. How could he not come to hate the villagers for this? Was he just ignoring the negative emotions instead of dealing with them? If he was just pushing them at the back of his head, then he was probably going to explode one day. Why don't you want to understand? Tsunade asked. Her tone hardened. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the tone. It sounded forceful. But he didn't mind responding to it. Honestly, I want to say I just don't care about it anymore. If my dream was still to become Hokage of this village, then I would be worried, but that isn't a priority for me anymore. Life is something else, isn't it? Before I left, I shouted being Hokage, and really, it looked as if it would be possible when they cheered for me at the chunin exams. With humans, anything can change. I have changed and they change every morning. One little thing about the Kyuubi and they are ready to abandon all the good memories and focus on their fears. Well, fear is a powerful thing, it can manipulate even the mightiest. So many decisions are taken because of fear, but that is life, unfortunately, for me. Tsunade frowned. She didn't want to think deep about this. She was already thinking too much about this thing about Danzo and how to deal with him. Jiraiya could deal with this. From what the Sannin has said, the blonde Uzumaki was very close to him. She could not penetrate through that cold exterior. The Godime Hokage sighed before shifting to the main subject. I called you here because I want to discuss how we are going to deal with this issue. Although I don't want to admit it, but you have grown and you need to know. This situation must be handled carefully, and Danzo must be punished for this treachery. I want to do it quietly. Naruto didn't smile at hearing that, he just tilted his head to the side, thinking about what the princess might be trying to suggest. There was something big that was going to happen and Naruto wasn't sure he wanted to be part of it. Then again, it could be his farewell message. Trashes like Danzo were the first ones who needed to be destroyed for a better world to come. I see you trying to convince the villagers that I did not try anything and that Danzo was actually the one who attempted to do something to me. It would be hard for the villagers to believe. They know what the Kyuubi can do and they know Danzo is one of the village elders. Shinobi population wouldn't have troubles, but civilians don't know anything. Between the host of the Kyuubi and a village elder, who is credible before their eyes, who do you think they will believe? Tsunade sneered in thought, but she gave Naruto a firm response. They will believe that snake. However, I'm still Tsunade, one of the legendary Sannins. When I came back here, they were singing my name. I will remind them it was you who convinced me to come back, and if they think I would lie like that to them, I will offer my resignation as Hokage. I've had no troubles living outside this village and I can do it again. You must understand that there are things worth protecting. Jiraiya couldn't convince me to come back to this village, no one could. I gambled, drank through my days. I was miserable for years, but you came along. It was your action and your words that convinced me to come back to this village. I have been at peace, happy since I came back. I owe that to you. Naruto smiled. It was a happy smile and it didn't last for just a second. He was honestly happy to hear those words from the woman. He wasn't going to deny that she had become a part of his family, but that would be destroyed when it turns this world into its knees. It was really a sad thing that he would hurt this woman who was willing to resign as the godime of this village for him, for the truth about him. It was really going to be a miserable existence out in the wild. If it would hurt Tsunade, how much more his friends and Jiraiya? What about Kakashi? He was going to lose another student. Yes, there would be a lot of people who were going to be hurt by his decision. For a moment, the smile on his face almost slipped off, but he held it firmly. Well, at least he was going to be quiet for a couple of years in the underground. It would give them much more time to think and forget about him. Hearing that makes me happy, Ba-chan. Naruto said. He could not hide the sadness in his tone. Neither Kakashi nor the slug princess commented on it, they just looked at each other for a moment before looking back at the blonde Uzumaki. What are you planning to do to Danzo? He must be executed for treason. Tsunade said in a tone of finality. It isn't going to be easy as he will not lie down and allow himself to be hanged. We must take measures to outmaneuver him and manage his route Anbu. We must deal with him in a way that they don't end up trying to get revenge for his death should they remain alive in the aftermath. Danzo's Anbu are highly trained but they are not that many. Last time, the Sandaime managed to surround them with his Anbu. However, since this time around, something has to happen to Danzo, it's not going to end with a stalemate, there will be bloodshed. Kakashi added. Tsunade nodded in agreement. Nothing is going to happen until Jiraiya returns, it has to happen quietly in the underground. Anyone who isn't involved must not know about it. The Godime paused for a moment before asking. Have you killed someone, Naruto? You want me to take part in this? He asked. You don't have to worry about me. The blonde Uzumaki said. This would be his last mission for the Hidden Leaf. He could do that and flex his muscles, but afterwards, he would be gone. The day that follows Konoha would wake up with him gone from the village. There would be no need to blame him for the murders if it was going to be hidden. People would ask questions later, but he did not worry about that. Are you sure? Naruto nodded. I have grown, he said before standing. I think I'm going to go have some ramen. I need something to soothe my soul. That said, the blonde Uzumaki walked away from the office without saying another word. Still within the Hokage Tower, Naruto came across what he recalled as Danzo's fan club. But according to Jiraiya, since Tsunade led the charge they have been a little different in their support of Danzo. Nevertheless, they were supporters of the War Hawk and would not mind digging him out of any hole he dug himself into. Those old wrinkled faces of the village's elders stared at him unflinching. You walk proudly after everything that has happened. The old woman said in a cold tone. Why should I act any differently? I'm not guilty of anything. It doesn't matter if you're guilty or not. Kaharu quickly said. Because of this, the village has lost its peace once more. The villagers are on edge thinking the Kyuubi will appear out of nowhere again. Naruto raised an eyebrow at this. Yes, she probably knew that Danzo had tried and failed to get his hands on him and resorted to such dirty tricks. Shouldn't you blame Danzo for that? The woman sneered. Danzo is blameless. He has always thought of Konoha in everything he does. The village has always come first in everything. Naruto stared back for a couple of seconds before shaking his head. He walked past the old pair without saying another word. He really didn't have the time to entertain such people of this foolishness. They could say whatever they felt was right in their heads. Perhaps old age was getting to them. But he wasn't going to stand there lest he ends up getting riled over something he could just ignore. Back in Tsunade's office, Jiraiya told me that Naruto had changed, but I didn't want to believe it. Tsunade said in a slightly tired tone. The more I see him, the more I realize that he has truly changed. He isn't the same brat he was back then. It isn't a bad thing, but I do miss those big smiles of his, the enthusiasm he showed when he spoke about becoming Hokage. I didn't think that a day would come when it would no longer be his dream. Honestly, Tsunade didn't know how to take this. When Naruto kept silent about this since his return, she had suspected something was up. Well, the cards were out now, but that didn't ease her worries. She couldn't even guess what the blonde was thinking. He didn't carry all his emotions on his face these days, but at least today he did reveal some of his thoughts. Tsunade really wished he had said something different, it wouldn't have worried her. At this stage, she was going to look for a good drink by lunchtime. I'm sure one person who will be baffled is Konohamaru. Kakashi said with a shake of his head. But I guess this is something that Jiraiya-sama already knew. Tsunade nodded. You have spent more time with him. How much difference do you see between this time and before he was stabbed by Sasuke? Kakashi seemed to flinch at the mention of Sasuke. It was actually the thought that he had used the jutsu that the Jonin had taught the Uchiha that made him flinch. He's a different person, but still Naruto. That doesn't make sense. Suan said. If he has changed, then he isn't the Na. The slug princess trailed off when Kaharu and Homura smoothly walked into the office. The two stood behind Kakashi and addressed the Godime Hokage. Are you just going to sit here whilst you watch the atmosphere in the streets becomes toxic? Kaharu said to the Godime. Whether Naruto is guilty or not, something has to be done about this matter. It won't take long for some to suspect that Naruto may be manipulating your actions. You know, things start little and someone pours in oil. Sooner or later, it becomes a wildfire that cannot be controlled. We need to control this matter before it gets out of control. Tsunade leaned back to her chair before folding her hands across her chest. Tell me, Kaharu, what do you suggest I do? You're not even accusing Naruto of trying to kill Danzo, and yet you're not pointing any fingers towards him. Danzo will always do everything for Konoha. Whatever he does is always for the good of the Hidden Leaf. Kaharu was firm on that note. She wasn't going as far as to say that she didn't think Naruto attacked Danzo. She has had a few encounters with the blonde when he was growing up. If anything, he had been an idiot and there was no way that was a mask. The only thing she could accuse the blonde Uzumaki of being guilty was being favored by the Hokages and not using the Kyuubi's power for the village's sake. She did have reservations about the blonde. 1. She did not trust him, not even the least. Considering the past that he has to face, there was a chance that he could flee the village. Perhaps Danzo was trying to avoid that. It would be a disaster for the Kyuubi to be taken by one of their enemies. It would certainly raise levels of fear within the village, and that was something they had to avoid at all costs. You should take Naruto off the streets and put him in Anbu. If the villagers don't see him, they will calm down a bit. Besides, when he is in Anbu, he can be monitored fairly. Homura said. You know that he is a flight risk. If he wasn't, this situation has made that a possibility. Tsunade kept a straight face when the old man said those words, but if she were to be honest, the thought did cross her mind. Although Naruto could be marked as a flight risk, she just didn't think that the blonde would go that far. That was just her opinion though. Logically, it made more sense for the blonde to go away. He could go to Sunagakur, if he knew how much Gaara seemed to value him. Naruto had said it. He no longer cared. He wasn't going to try to do anything good in order to win them over because he no longer cared. He didn't want their approval. He didn't want to become Hokage anymore. There was something that he was after. If he no longer wanted to become Hokage, he was going to do something. She just couldn't put a finger on it. You must act quickly, Tsunade. Kaharu said in a stern tone before walking away from the office along with her partner in crime. Kakashi stared at the Godime for a long minute before asking something. Did you consider that he could be a flight risk when he was here? Is that why you didn't tell him you were thinking he should just depart the village for a while until things calm down? You heard him, Kakashi. He doesn't care. He doesn't want to understand anything about them. Even if Naruto has friends in this village, do you think that would be enough to keep him here if he can be happy elsewhere? When you think about it, take note that he no longer has any desire to lead this village. You can as well say, he has lost his love for Konoha. Well, I can't blame him after everything. The Jonin could not deny anything the Godime had said, but he did not comment on it. He merely stood up. I will hear what Jiraiya-sama has to say when he comes back. But I will try to talk to Naruto just to see what he plans on doing. Later, Training Ground 7. Sakura looked sadly into the skies, surrounded by her friends. Life was a bit unfair, wasn't it? Perhaps she was being selfish, but she had lost Sasuke, her dear love, but now Naruto was going through another situation. They could all vouch for Naruto's character, but they didn't share the same thoughts as the villagers. Things were not going smoothly, and on top of that, since Naruto returned from his training trip, it has felt as if she was losing him by the second. The Pinkett shook her head. Now wasn't the time to think about her feelings. She had to think about Naruto. What was happening to his life wasn't what she would like for her teammate. It was unacceptable and they didn't even have to see anything to defend their friend. They knew that their Naruto would never do something like that. Has anyone even seen Naruto? Ino asked quietly. My dad said he was going to be released because he was cleared of any wrongdoing. A pity that something like that had happened. She was even beginning to like this new Naruto. He wasn't like that loud and idiotic blonde who was hopelessly in love with Sakura. Thinking of it, he hasn't called Sakura, Sakura-chan, since his return, has he? Now that was something interesting. Ino shook her head before she lost track of her thoughts. Sakura shook her head. I haven't seen him but I know he was released today. She said in a sad tone. I doubt he would take any joy in walking around the streets when things are like this. Kiba looked around for a moment before speaking his thoughts. Isn't anyone going to talk about how Naruto is the host of the Kyuubi? I mean the Kyuubi, the freaking beast that nearly destroyed this village. He was honestly baffled that he had known the blonde idiot for such a long time and yet he didn't know that he held such a burden within him. Well, the fact that Naruto wasn't anything like Gaara just meant that being a Jinchuriki didn't change the way he lived his life. Still, how could he not know about this? Naruto never talked about it to anyone. Never. He never let it slip, not even in his happiest days. Isn't it something that despite being a loudmouth who couldn't keep things to himself he never let anyone know about it? Ino said with a curious look about her. I wonder what more secrets he could be hiding. Tenten shook her head at that expression from Ino. Really? At this time, she was thinking of discovering more secrets from the blonde. It was apparent that she didn't think too much about Naruto being a Jinchuriki of a Biju that nearly destroyed the hidden leaf. Then again, none of her friends seemed to be filtered with contempt when Kiba said those words. Surprisingly, Hinata chose to speak at that moment. I doubt Naruto would be avoiding the streets because of something like this. This isn't the worst of what he has faced in his life. There was no way she could not remember those pitiful days even her father told her to stay away from the blonde Jinchuriki. Everyone had looked at him with contempt when he was younger and of fragile heart. But above everything, he had always smiled and kept strong. At least now, he was grown and this wasn't as bad as it had been when he was younger. Hinata's words brought silence as they tried to contemplate the meaning of her words. What do you mean by that, Hinata? The idiot always wore a smile. Shikamaru sighed tiredly. This was all just a mess he would rather not deal with. Really, instead of coming here, he could have preferred to just go somewhere else and watch the clouds or just take a nap. There was nothing that was going to change in whatever they were going to say to each other. If something was going to change, it would be up to Naruto or the Godime Hokage. They could only offer emotional support to their friend. But would the new Naruto really accept that? Shikamaru could not tell. He doubted the Naruto he has been seeing over the past days would be someone honestly troubled by this. But of course, it didn't mean it was something he could just take on the chin and continue walking as if nothing has happened. Someone spread a rumor that he had tried to kill a village elder and was being influenced by the Kyuubi. People suspected things and then were remembering the day the Biju wreaked havoc within the leaf. Perhaps that forgotten fear just returned. There was nothing that the civilians feared more than the Kyuubi. Even shinobi feared the Biju. If it appeared once more, many would run to safety places along with civilians. It isn't surprising that you never noticed what happened in his life, Shikamaru said to Kiba. He wasn't going to tell the unpleasant story of how Naruto was hated by the villagers, called a demon and parents warning their children off the blonde. Despite being a censor, observation was never Kiba's strength, well unless it is a mission. It was the voice of Naruto. All eyes turned towards a tree nearby. The blonde was sitting on a tree branch, overlooking the group with an expressionless mask on his face. Are you insulting me, Tem? Kiba demanded, ready to launch an attack towards the blonde. No, just making an observation. Naruto responded a bit carelessly. Hinata, I never considered how much your eyes were always on me, watching my every move. Of everyone, you are the one who knows how much I've had to suffer. Look at it in this way. I housed a Biju that killed many people, loved ones. To the villagers of this village, I was nothing more than a spawn of that demon. To make matters worse, I was an orphan, there were no parents to claim me who could say they made me. People hated me, as they hated the QB. I got kicked out of the orphanage and by age 5, I was already living by myself. The Sandaime passed a law that no one should say, QB, or even talk about it. Instead, the people resorted to calling me a demon. This is why our generation never knew about it. Parents just told their children to stay away from me because I was no good. As a result, I couldn't make any friends. Do you know what was worse? Even I didn't know I was a Jinchuriki. My entire life in the academy, I was hated, and didn't know why. Confusing. There had been moments I thought perhaps I was a demon. Don't you guys find it odd that I failed the graduation exam but the next day I came back with a headband? I failed because I couldn't create a bunshin, simple jutsu really, and those who should fail to do it are those like Lee. He meant no offense in that. Mizuki told me of a way to pass, steal the forbidden scroll and learn a jutsu from it. I stole the scroll from the Sandaime's office and learned what you call my signature jutsu, Cage Bunshin. Within a couple of hours, I learned that jutsu. That was the night Mizuki told me I housed the QB and the night Iruka passed me for completing a B rank mission. Oh yeah, I defeated Mizuki by myself. So, I have always been cool. Ino snorted at those last words. Yeah right, she said. You were far from cool. She said. Well, at least you are now. For those girls who like bad boys will surely be all over you now. I'm sure they will be in dreamland, hearing how you survived torture in Anbu cells, accusations of killing a village elder. Naruto raised an eyebrow before smiling. I don't get that part of you, Ino. Well, the blonde has always been something else, just never interested him. The feeling was mutual though. However, he was sure in the younger days, Ino would have thought of the idea of a relationship with him to be the worst nightmare. Though, I must say, I'm honored that a delightful girl as you thinks that, regardless of how slightly twisted it was. Sakura looked at the smile on Naruto's face and then at Ino. She shook her head. Was this really happening? If anything, it looked as if Ino was flirting with Naruto. She had never thought something like that would be possible, but it was happening. Sure, Naruto wasn't the same anymore, he wasn't asking her out and never looked at her in the same way as he did before, but he was still Naruto. She would never think of him in any other way other than a friend, a good friend. There had been so many moments that they passed through because of him. Have you no shame, Ino? Sakura demanded. She didn't wait for a response though, as she chose to focus on the important matter. I never actually noticed. You were always talking, loud, saying stupid things, and I may have added to the insults. Sakura sounded a bit bitter at this. I did say some insensitive things to you. You were actually the one person out of everyone here who said insensitive things to me. Naruto said to Sakura. Of course, those words only made the Pinkett look down in shame. But that is in the past now. Why didn't you ever say anything? Like I said, I didn't know about it until the night of graduation. Back then, I was afraid of losing friends if they found out about it. Now, it never seemed convenient. Naruto said a bit carelessly. He turned to Neji. When I spoke about crafting your own fate, I said it because I carried a bigger burden than you did. You could say Jinchurikis are fated to be used as weapons, hated and betrayed. I have experienced a couple of things, but I have never allowed any of it to determine my future. The blonde Uzumaki said before falling silent for a couple of seconds. You guys don't have to worry about me. It really means a lot though, that you have gathered here because you care. I won't forget that. He smiled before disappearing in a puff of smoke. That was a clone. Shikamaru sighed before turning away from the group. Everything was settled. There was nothing to worry about. Naruto didn't have mental problems that needed healing. Where are you going? I don't see any reason to stay here, Shikamaru said. I'm sure Naruto has already spoken to the Hokage about this matter. They probably have a way of dealing with it. We will see in the next couple of days. He wasn't going to say Naruto's indifference about the matter was a little startling, those were thoughts that needed to be kept to himself. If he had the energy, he would seek out the blonde Uzumaki to question him about it, but he didn't have any and wasn't going to do anything unless an opportunity presented itself in a silver platter. Foundation bases. It wasn't often that Jiraiya took reckless decisions to charge into enemy territories in anger. Well, he has walked into enemy lands but never fueled by anger. This time it was different, and if Danzo wanted to fight him, Jiraiya was prepared to retaliate. He was even willing to allow the man to see his senjutsu in the process. He simply could not allow the man to walk freely without letting him know of his feelings regarding this mess he has just caused. The Foundation Anbu didn't try to fight him, as most shinobi who fear his name. They had greeted him stiffly and escorted him to their master. The old war hawk was sitting on a throne-like chair, his never-changing expression glaring down at his face. I didn't know you knew about this place's entrance. I don't remember the last time you stepped in here. Danzo said to Jiraiya. That wasn't to say that Anbu didn't know about it. Maybe some of them didn't know, but the old ones knew. Some of them had charged into this place along with the Sandaime Hokage when he had made the attempt to get the old man assassinated by Kakashi. What a failure that was. But Jiraiya was always away from the village, so he never came around this part of Konoha's darkness. Just because I never come doesn't mean I don't know. Jiraiya said sternly. Kakashi worked for you and so did Itachi. I think you are forgetting that I run a spy network. Do you think that I'd miss things happening in this village? There have been things that happened in your absence, and even after they happened, you never came back in time. Danzo said effortlessly. That is something that has to be dealt with. Well, since Tsunade returned to become Hokage, your presence and activities within the village have increased. At least that is a change. Sensei let a couple of things go your way even when you tried to have him killed. I'd always told him to take a firm action with you, but he insisted on doing things his way. However, when you framed Naruto for trying to kill you, you crossed a line. You made things personal. Jiraiya said in a cold tone, leaking a murderous intent that put the present agents on edge. Take me seriously when I say that you will not get away with it. The Sannin said those words and stared down at the war hawk for a long minute before turning away. Danzo narrowed his eyes. He could spot a threat miles off, but he felt he needed to ask this just to be sure. He never been threatened by the Sannin. Now he had two Sannins against him. Tsunade had sent him a message and it had been loud and clear. The woman wasn't going to simply sit back and watch things boil over whilst standing by the side. She was going to do something. How he missed the days he used to spar with the Sandaime Hokage. Are you threatening me, Jiraiya? Threaten? Jiraiya said. No. I'm letting you know that you will pay, even if it means I have to burn down this entire facility to do it. I will make you pay. It's not a matter of if, but when. The Sannin strolled away in an imposing manner after saying those words. He left Danzo with no doubt that he was going to take action over his treacherous actions. He had done everything to make sure that Naruto rebuilds his life and tries something for Konoha, but this bastard had ruined everything. Letting him go without ripping him would be just careless and not acting in the best interest of the village and Naruto. More importantly though, Naruto's interests. Danzo stared at Jiraiya's back until he disappeared, digesting what the Sannin had just said. There was no way he could count the threat as nothing. Unlike other people, Jiraiya wasn't just a small boy he could handle easily or manipulate. The man was a Sannin who has demonstrated his power repeatedly. If anything, Danzo would have avoided a fight with the Sannin. Jiraiya would not only be the problem, Tsunade and Kakashi would surely get in the act. Even so, Danzo didn't think that this was something he could not handle. He could handle this situation without any trouble. He would just need to be careful to avoid falling needlessly. Annoyed, Danzo started. Arrange for an increase in security around the perimeter. Something is going to happen soon. Hi, Danzo-sama. Danzo was left alone trying to figure what the Sannins were going to do. What would they do to him? He didn't think they would go as far as to try to kill him. Well, the look on Jiraiya's face could argue with that. Nevertheless, he did think it was just the man allowing his emotions getting the better of him. He wasn't going to provoke anything further, but just watch things proceed smoothly. The stage was set and he had played his cards. It was time for Tsunade to make her move. He did have Naruto exactly where he wanted him, isolated from the rest of the village. A few minutes later, "You took your time to get back, you damn pervert." Tsunade all but shouted at Jiraiya the moment the Sannin appeared in her office. She didn't care about the rare stern look on his face. She was going to put one in a couple of moments once she has gotten over her emotions over the fact that he was finally back. "I was in a dangerous situation," Jiraiya said, "but I returned as soon as I could. I have already spoken to Danzo. I'm sure he will be alert for any strange movements. It doesn't matter regardless, a firm action must be taken against him. Naruto was his precious godson and he wasn't going to allow anyone to ruin his future, especially not a corrupt bastard like Danzo. You're more pressing on taking action," Tsunade said. Not that it was surprising since she was also pressed on doing something against Danzo. But this was Jiraiya and he should know how to handle things smoothly. If it was something else, he wouldn't have started by seeing the War Hawk, but he would have come to her to discuss things before going to Danzo. "Why did you even say to him?" "I told him that he was going to pay," Jiraiya said in a firm tone. Danzo made a grave mistake in doing what he just did. Naruto isn't the same as he was back then. I'm not saying that there is something dark about him, but he doesn't think as kindly as he used to in his younger days. He is no longer an innocent little boy. The changes in him mean that he isn't going to try to talk his oppositions into surrendering. I'm also afraid of Naruto's response to all these. I know he no longer has any plans on becoming Hokage. Although he never said anything to me, I could tell because whenever I brought it up, he never showed any interest in it. He was most focused on the peace talk. Perhaps I should have noticed it, but I indulged it because finally, I wanted to talk to someone who was interested in peace. The Sannin shook his head after saying those words. Well, we just have to do damage control and a decision has already been made on how to deal with Danzo, Tsunade said firmly. The following day, early morning. Training Ground 44. The surrounding trees were cut down, leaving a clear field. If anything, it appeared as if someone had just been chopping down the trees to clear the way for some building. He could feel wind chakra all over the place to be able to tell that this destruction wasn't natural. He had seen something like this before when Naruto was practicing wind control and wind jutsus. The element was his strongest and he was trying to learn other elements. Wind stood out the most though. He still had a long way to go with it, but he could do some things that not many could do with it. Jiraiya looked at the center of the destruction. There was Naruto, sitting in a meditative position, right hand held out with a mini Rasenshuriken spinning powerfully. His eyes were closed and there were bruises around his frame. Still trying to maximize the use of that jutsu? Jiraiya asked calmly. Yes, but the struggle doesn't seem like it will end soon. I cannot control it each time I increase the power within it. I have to find more power when not using senjutsu to be able to control and be able to hurl it. In this way, it will damage my hand if use it in its current form. It also consumes too much chakra. I can create thousands of Kage Bunshins each with Rasengans, but I can only do 2 Rasenshurikens and still hope to continue fighting. A third one will leave me with only enough energy to run away. A fourth would likely leave me emaciated only because I'm a Jinchuriki. If not, it would kill me. Jiraiya nodded. Well, you're trying to create a powerful AS-rated jutsu. If you perfect it, I don't see any defense jutsu capable of completely blocking it. It would simply rip through all forms of defense. Perhaps metal would be its weakness, but anything that can shatter or be moved, it would penetrate. The Sannin said. Why do you want to be able to use it repeatedly? I'm going to fight many battles in the future, fight powerful opponents. I need to be strong. Naruto said. About that, Jiraiya started in a serious tone. The seriousness of his tone caused Naruto to cancel his jutsu and face the Toad Sage. We need to talk about a threat that has arisen within the elemental nations. Naruto stared at the Sannin for a long minute. There was always something in this world, wasn't it? Corrupt and inhuman pieces of flesh like Orochimaru walked within this world, destabilizing peaceful lands with their madness. For Jiraiya to speak in such seriousness, this meant that the threat was very big. You must have heard me talking about the Akatsuki in my conversations with my people. I never told you anything about it and you never bothered to ask about it. Naruto shrugged. My trust in you compels me to be silent on some matters and wait on you to come to me. I'm not going to hear something or suspect that you are hiding something from me then charge straight to demand answers. Jiraiya smiled briefly at that before getting onto his message. They are a group of S-ranked rogue shinobi headed by a mysterious leader. 2 former Leaf shinobi have connections with the organization. Orochimaru is a former member and Itachi is a current member. I don't know how many members they have, but they were doing mercenary missions in the past. Anything you paid, they could do. Either destroying a small village or assassination, they did everything. Iwagakure is rumored to have used their services. My intel suggests that they may perhaps be pushing a bigger agenda. I don't know for sure, but it appears that they are now going after Jinchurikis. I don't know for what reason, but I doubt it is anything good. This means that your very life is in danger. I have already spoken about it with Tsunade and she agrees that for your safety, you must never be alone when outside the village. S-rank shinobi are basically cage level. With senjutsu you should be able to handle yourself against one, but there is a lot we don't know about their strength. Naruto silently absorbed what he was being told by the Sannin with a frown on his lips. It was rather sad that something like this was happening. There was the danger that this could destabilize the current flow of things within the elemental nations. Things were calm, but anything can brew at any moment in this world of shinobi. If the Akatsuki is truly after Jinchurikis, it simply meant they were after the power. What could they possibly wish to do with that power? There are 9-tailed beasts and I host the strongest. Do you know other Jinchurikis? Aside from Gaara, I don't know any other. Naruto said. Kumo has 2, so does Iwa. Kiri used to have 1 but he has since disappeared. Jiraiya said. This complicates things given that there is still the issue of Danzo that needs to be dealt with. Naruto nodded. Outside the village is no longer safe and in here there is a situation that can drive someone mental. The blonde Uzumaki sighed tiredly. This is going to put a strain on my mind. He said. I know. Jiraiya said sadly. Are you sure you want to be involved? It is going to be messy. Naruto nodded. There is no way of avoiding it. Besides, I must grow. It's not going to be pleasant as I don't handle blood very well, but it has to be done. Jiraiya nodded. How about we meet for a bottle of sake later on? You can help me pick on women as we drink. I haven't had any good materials recently. The Toad Sage said with a grin. Naruto smiled. Sure, why not? It was going to be the last fun he has with this Jiraiya. He may as well depart with a bang.